Yeah.
I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won. Yeah. I hope my team they won. Yeah. Man, I hope my team they won. I hope my team they won. Yeah. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, and we are making things work. Mike is out on assignment. Charles is literally fighting the rain, thunder, and lightning in Houston, where the powers went out. So he's using his phone as best as possible. So we might have
looked like he froze up on us too.
Yeah, a little in and out technicality.
There he is.
Does that. So with that being said, Charles, how you doing today other than fighting Mother that is undefeated?
Yeah, and she's proven to me she's undefeated. I'm definitely fighting it.
No doubt about it. Appreciate you putting all the extra effort in. With that being said, we have one of the best pinch hitters out there in the game. You know, obviously, Professor Extraordinaire, as he is an assistant professor with tenure track last time y'all got the notification on that. We have AD Drew. How you doing, Drew?
Hey, I'm doing fine, my brother. Doing fine. No weather here today. We had some yesterday and the day before, but since Texas is west of Georgia and we're pretty much on the same longitudinal plane, I'll probably catch it about Thursday, Friday.
Right. I didn't know if you were so kind that you pushed it our way. I wasn't sure which one.
No, y'all get it first.
Give it back. With that being said, welcome to episode 391 Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast, as we have the countdown to 400. Countdown to 400. The show that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora sports from institutions large and small. From the NAIA to the NCAA, we share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics, to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As I said, Mike Washington is out on assignment, and we have none other than AD Drew in the building. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live as best as possible, as long as Mother Nature holds up, to our KCWH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, with multi-Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper. And in fact, this is Ralph Cooper Day. Mayor Sylvester Turner provided, along with the city council, recognized Mr. Ralph Cooper, our Ralph Cooper, that really got us in the game from this side until Roy pushed us to the streaming platform like he did. He really gets a lot of accolades, so we wanted to send him love. Ralph Cooper Day in Houston, Texas. How about that?
Yeah, you can't say enough about that, Doc. I'm really excited for Ralph getting that recognition. It's important that he receives his flowers because he's done so much with regards to this Houston sports radio, this Houston sporting environment, if you will.
No doubt. Great. I'm glad you chimed in there, right? Because that certainly is appropriate. That means I just have to find another beer or two. So I'll make sure I call you so you can help me disperse the expenses on that, because he's going to expect both of us. But we'll make sure we get that right. And this is in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency, LLC. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. A lot going on in a lot of areas outside of HBCU sports and the professional sports. But unfortunately, we're going to stay right here on the HBCU framework, but this is really going to be outside of the sporting context. I have to provide some difficult news. Some is going to make you angry, as historically we know what this means, and this is nothing to play with. Prairie had calls in today in terms of bomb threats. So they had to cancel traditional work day. Fortunately, for the most part, students are gone. As you know, graduation for Texas Southern and Prairie View this past weekend, as you continue the tradition with a lot of HBCUs having graduation on Mother Day weekend. So that took place, but you still have faculty, mainly staff and administrators on campus. So they had to leave today. I'm filming from at home because we had a gas leak, but it's my understanding that there may be a caller in that called in at Texas Southern University as well in terms of the bomb threat. So
same thing happened at Jackson State today.
So this is a extremely wretched time in a lot of ways. Where literally folks are trying to change black back, and I did say black in terms of those that understand the history to change the time. We just came from Alabama, or at least I did, a couple of years ago in terms of our time getting ready to go back to Alabama for SWAC Media Day in Birmingham, and we know what took place in Birmingham in terms of the tragedy of the bombing that killed those young women in connection with that. So not whether somebody has the ability to put bombs on campus, but the fact that they understand the triggering of what that does is serious enough. And so all hands on deck to make sure that we do our part in supporting these HBCU institutions in terms of what that looks like. So I did want to say that before we had some brevity in that. Are there some additional comments, concerns, AD Drew, that you wanted to address on top of that as well before we move into some sporting talk?
Yeah, the bill that was signed in the state of Florida, that basically says that no racial equity classes can be taught in a public institution that receives state funds. So not only does it look like we're being attacked via the bomb threats, and of course we know what the gun violence has been out here as of recent, but now they want to attack us intellectually by not only making us less aware of who we are, but also making other cultures not aware of our diverse history. And we should be learning about African American culture as well as we learn about Asian American culture, Hispanic American culture, and we know about European culture. But the more that you learn about other people's culture, the more respect that we can get for where we are now, because we understand where everyone has come from. So shame on the state of Florida. And in a sporting context, I wonder if this will give a Bethune-Cookman a recruiting advantage, because woke students may not want to go to the public institution because of these changes and the ramifications from these changes, and tilt that tide where Bethune has been the little brother or the little cousin for so long over to them. If we talk about it in the sporting context, that's the sports question related to that Florida bill that was just signed by the governor. I won't call his name, but I'll just call him the governor of that state where I used to live.
Yeah, great point, because at the end of the day, it all ties in together. Yeah. So it's a tragedy in terms of the deception. And some people say straight out lies in regards to the ability to navigate the space, particularly in a country that likes to provide the framework of freedom. So what happened to that audacity of suggesting that you're in a free market, a free country in terms of you being able to voice your opinion? So it's not so much to say that you may not disagree with DEI or disagree with critical race theory, but the fact that you shut it down. Authoritarian is the terminology for those that still continue to understand history, see exactly what this is. And that is not democratic nor capitalistic in nature. But we'll get back to the sporting context. As you see, I do have my Prairie View paraphernalia on, and that is because this past weekend, among many championships that were handed out across the various HBCU conferences, for a lack of a better word, and a national championship as well, Prairie View A&M claimed SWAC softball tournament title. As you all are aware of, this is back-to-back titles. Prairie View, in terms of their conference, had only lost 2 games, and they defeated both teams that defeated them. In terms of Texas Southern, they lost the last game there, essentially of the year in terms of that series, and then they did get some payback for the loss that Grambling put on them, the first loss that they had on the schedule in terms of the conference race. So kudos to the Prairie View. Obviously, they got it done in a lot of ways. Junior Destiny Smith picked up 8-7 victory over Grambling State Tigers that fought hard, extremely fought. Actually took the lead in that game until Prairie View was able to show their championship medal and come back in that last inning. Junior Jericho Rojas went 11-2, picked up the victory out of the bullpen for Prairie View A&M that went 27-18. The right-hander went 1 shutout inning while giving up 1 hit. Sophomore Aaron Talley led the way offensively for the Lady Panthers, going 1 for 3 in the ball game with a home run, a walk, and 4 RBIs. Grambling did get it done in terms of Lauren Irvin and Kadisha Collins paced the GSU offensive attack with 2 RBI each. Freshman Mia Nunez provided a noteworthy performance as well, going 2 for 4 with a double and an RBI. Smith also chipping in, going 1 for 2 for Prairie View A&M with 2 walks and a RBI. So kudos to Vernon Bland. I actually was in school with Vernon Bland, so that's kind of cool to see somebody that you walk Prairie View campus, the yard as we like all to call it, obviously the hill for those that are familiar with this part of the West area. I know a lot of other folks use that vernacular as well, but it was very enlightening, very calm. So kudos to all those involved in terms of the championship there. SWAC all-tournament teams, Jocelyn Davis, Bethune-Cookman, Kerry Parker, Alcorn State, Kerry Howard, Alcorn State, Kristen Edwards, Alcorn State, Marsha Hunt, Alcorn State, that went into the loser bracket but gave everybody they wanted and was one of the final 3 standing, with the final 3 coming out of the West. 4 out of the final 5 were out of the West Division. The first 2 teams to go 2 in barbecue. The leader tournament went out of the East. Oddly enough, were the top 2 teams. So it was intriguing in terms of how we like to look at the dynamics between the West and East. I would be remiss if I didn't jump in here. North Carolina Central wins the MEAC. They were forced to go to the winner take all game as they lost the first championship game. Coppin State coming out of the loser bracket, but Coppin State lost against North Carolina Central in the second matchup on Saturday. That was on ESPN Plus. As North Carolina pulled out the victory 6-2 to win their first ever MEAC championship. Game was held there. So kudos to outstanding MEAC tournaments. Vanessa Carosa, Coppin State, Siriana Esperanza, Coppin State, Amelia Weber Howard, Mia Gonzalez Howard, Amia Bellinger, Maryland Eastern Shore, Caitlin Smitchko, Maryland Eastern Shore, Anita Hunter, Morgan State, Gabby Vaughn, Norfolk State, Jaden Davis, North Carolina Central, Morgan Green, North Carolina Central, and Asante Eubanks, North Carolina Central. So kudos for them being able to get the championships in terms of what took place there. Obviously, there were a couple of other championships, but we'll share those on Thursday as we get back to it. Want to get into our first break. At the end of the show, we'll come back and see if AD Drew wants to have some additional news he wants to get out there, or anything Charles may have a thought on those championships. But let's take our first break, come back on the other side. We'll get into a little bit of the baseball talk We're going to go into SWAC. I'll give you some updates quickly in terms of what's going on with our independents. They're struggling, trying to see if they can make that march getting into the close of the season. This is the last weekend before you get into tournament action next weekend, specifically for the SWAC. So we'll talk a little bit of touch on that about this last weekend. We'll start as we do with divisional play, Eastern Division, get in the Western Division. So get these two gentlemen's thoughts in terms of what that may look like this week as things close. It looks like Alabama State, for the most part, has the Eastern Division wrapped up. But there may be a little bit of fun in the Western Division, if not at the top, a little bit of seeding there. And so we'll get to tell you what that looks like. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this first break. Come back on the other side.
Since 2002, Empowerment Resources, Inc., a nonprofit organization, has empowered more than 1,500 youth and adults in Duval and surrounding counties through its programs Journey into Womanhood, Girls Mentoring, Life Skills for Teens, and parenting education coaching. To get involved with programs, volunteer, or donate, visit www.empowermentresourcesinc.org. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/empowerment.resources and instagram.com/empowermentJAX.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
You're looking for the latest information on Southern University sports, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, and HBCU athletics. There's only one place to go. Tune in to the Carlos Brown Show, exclusively on the Black College Sports Network.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna law, yeah, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. As we said, we're having the weather issues, but I think Charles is fine. He'll be back in for the next two segments. So we're going to make a little adjustment. Instead of talking, as we said, a little bit about the SWAC, we're going to hold off that and go back on some news and get some discussion going. I wanted to jump in here and ask AD Drew, what are some of the hot topics that are on your mind in terms of the HBCU sporting scene this week?
But the hot topic has to be the article that came out from HBCU Game Day on the Division II level, and that is zero means no. That should have been the title of the article. Zero means no, saying that the two champions of the conferences, Fayetteville State and Benedict, had proposed a week zero matchup. And the NCAA said no. The week zero essentially is reserved for FCS and FBS. And this is from HBCUGameDay.com. Why did the NCAA turn the game down? No Division II conferences or teams have participated in week zero games. It appears because there is no precedent for Division II conferences playing week zero games. The SIAC and the CIAA waiver was turned down by the NCAA. So that was one of the reasons. One of the other reasons, and it's mentioned in this article, that game, should it be played, would potentially put both of these teams over the Division II cap of 11 games, should they both make it back to the championship game, which we know is their aspiration when this thing is all said and done. So by going over that cap, that's another reason why this game was potentially turned down. So, and I've got my own thoughts on that week 11, the championship game, and other things that could be done around that. But that's a discussion for a different podcast, Dr. Cavil.
No, we can get into that. We got a little time for that. But I'm fascinated about this topic. And let's chop into it a little more. And I'm glad you brought it up in terms of news, because there's been a lot of talk out of there, whether it's in social media platforms. Some of our colleagues that also do great HBCU sports show, the Golden Boot and things of that nature, are talking about this as well in terms of what that looks like. And so I wanted to give a little context as we got Charles able to get it set up in here. And so just to level set, we're talking about staying with some news and HBCU talk. So we're going to talk about the next two segments, 3 and 4. We'll get into the baseball talk for the SWAC and Independence. But we decided to carry on the news and maybe get a little dialogue, particularly with this being so hot, which is the order that came back out there, HBCU Game Day, HBCU Sports, in regards to the push for a week 0 game between the SIAC and CIAA, with Charlie Neal, the legendary broadcaster, now working with HBCU Go, asking the two commissioners in regards to petition the NCAA to allow them to play in week 0. I think the first thing that is important, we saw the partnership that came out with all 4 HBCU conference talking about working a lot more together. I think this shows a clear design that the two Division II conference, CIAA, SIAC, have started that in terms of being able to work, not only all 4 of them working together, but specifically working on projects to work together. And then with the opportunity to HBCU Go to put this out there, they petitioned the NCAA. And a lot of folks, one thing that I wanted to clear up is that sometimes we look at the NCAA as almost as if it's the boogeyman. If it is the entity that literally makes decisions. And people have heard me say this over and over, and people are starting to pick up this and kind of understand a little more. The NCAA is just a governance body. It's a governance structure. It's important for all of us to realize, because sometimes I think the ADs, the commissioners, particularly of the Autonomy 5, as they like to be called, we know them as the Power 5, and to some degree the G5, love to put out as if the NCAA is doing things or won't allow them to do things or they need to fix stuff. But it is the presidents and the chancellors and the ADs that set policy. Let me say that again. It is the chancellors and the presidents at each divisional level where they voted. When we talked about the transformation committee, one of the things they put out there is each division now has the ability to govern themselves, even more so in terms of the ability to navigate the space with the best practice for them. So the presidents and chancellors put these rules on the books in terms of what they're doing. They vote on this, and these committees are held at each level, sometimes by senior women administrators, ADs. They put policies together. They go up to the presidents that vote on it, and then the NCAA as a body led by the president of the organization just govern it. It just governs the process. They don't set rules. They don't set policies. So it's not what the NCAA did. It's the fact that they govern the policy. And this is where we need to be clear. It was the NCAA Division II presidents and chancellors that voted on the rule that week 1 must start in this. And I'm reading it from the NCAA.org bylaws, right? I can give you the page and everything. You can Google it up yourself. And this is 515 of 23, latest version. Page 306 is the first breakdown of figure 17.2 that talks about playing and practice season. This is the rule. It starts on football. You can look that up. It's 710-10 because that's the NCAA rule and bylaws. So I'm just reading. This is not me being quote unquote smart person. I just know what the rules are, and I know that you can go look them up. So it says football, first practice date, 24 days prior to the first permissible contest or 10 days prior to the first day of classes, whichever is easier. That's what the presidents of Division II and chancellors set. All the NCAA is going to give you and say, hey, this is what you can do. This is what y'all voted on. So no, you can't do that. The second thing is first contest date or date of competition. Thursday preceding September 6th. That's the rule.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Division II people voted on. That ain't the NCAA. They just say, hey, that's what you said. And end of the regular playing season is conclusion of the NCAA Division II football championship. So that's their calendar. That's all the stuff in there. Now the presidents and chancellors have every week, and this is good because now the presidents of the CIAA and SIAC can petition the other presidents and say, hey, we need to do this. It's better for our leagues. Let's carve out bylaws that allow us to do this. Then the NCAA is going to be like, yep, that's part of the bylaws. Y'all voted, y'all ratified it. We'll sanction. That's the process. So it's not NCAA with the person that is a czar, even though some people say they should have a czar, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that. But just wanted to make sure people were clear on the process. With that being said, let me shout out some of the great lab listeners out here. Jerome, Jeep Sutton, Emma Price, Chuck Hunt, G. Boom Holly in the house, Edwin D. Moore, Benita Bowling, Silas, Edward McMorris, Arby Parker. Good evening, gentlemen, he says. A lot of folks are paying kudos and saying good evening on here. Varick Williams, Southern. I see the Jags are woken up. I see you back, Varick. Jags must be playing pretty well.
It must be close to tournament time.
Here.
Always for Jags.
Waters, Ricky Burton. I kid you because I care, Varick, with them blue and gold glasses. Nothing wrong with being a super fan, though. We need more of that. Carol Keelam. Who else we have? Charles Edmond. Appreciate the love, Charles Edmond. Doing the strongman contest on the radio with the softball. Kudos to him. I agree with Carlos. You deserve to be in the SWAC Hall of Fame at some point. We got to find a way to make sure that you're in, even if it's as a contributor. I think they've opened up those lanes, so you deserve that as much as anyone. So we need to make sure that we do what's right to get those that have spent a lifetime providing us a voice to be able to follow the SWAC. So shout out to Charles Edmond and shout out to Carlos Brown for putting that out there. Junior Castile, Lonnie Shaw, John Richardson, Jeff Roberts, all in the building. Hopefully we gave you some good updates in terms of what that is. Before we go to this next break, any thoughts from you, Charles, in terms of obviously the thought process of the article, which is great information and great to see that they're pushing for that. But then my diatribe, if you want to call it that, in regards to at least understanding the NCAA process in terms of how things are put out there, because it unnerves us when we get out there and we say stuff as if it doesn't look like we understand. And we have the ability to inform our listeners to make sure that they're as educated as possible. So when they do make concerns, that they're doing it from the best knowledge possible in terms of what they want to see, and not are being misled one way or the other. Go ahead, Charles.
Well, I think first and foremost, kudos to you for explaining and putting it out there in regards to clarifying, sort of the process by which teams go about playing in week 0. The question, I guess, that I would have do our presidents and administrators on the Division II level, they see the importance of playing at week 0 game now, especially with regards to national exposure, branding, and this, that, and the other, with regards to the institution, because I guess it goes back for me, like, how do we sort of miss the ball moving when the trend was starting to play these week 0 games, and we see how immensely popular they are, especially with regards to the sporting public. There is a thirst, a hunger for college football, especially that back weekend of August before Labor Day now.
With that being said, certainly good points when you say that. I do want to give a little stuff not to cover for the president's chancellors as if they need it, but they still are voting in the group. So even if they had to put that out there, they may not necessarily be able to carry the vote to get it across. We remember at one time, FCS, if you remember, we're trying to open up to get that extra game. And the body of FCS voted it down, even though obviously the SWAC and MEAC wanted it and a couple of other FCS program conferences. But wasn't enough. So that's part of it. And two, this is the first time I think that it was viable where they had a platform of a magnitude that said they wanted to put it out there. So you got two parts of the partnership. Not only are you willing to do it, so even if you saw it, I'm not sure if you didn't have the vehicle to distribute where you can get the brand awareness, would you have kind of known that? So I do want to put that on the table to your overall point of something more consideration. Before we go to this next break, I did want to go back to you, Drew. Any additional thoughts you may have after, again, I provided some additional context to the subject, because I'm glad you put that on the table.
Well, and I'll be brief, Dr. Cavil. Given all the parameters that you have you put out there, okay, SIAC, CIAA, let's see if we can come up with another way that we can have an event such as this happen. Division II schedules aren't made as far in advance as FCS and definitely FBS schedules. A lot of times on Division II level, they are year to year, maybe 2 years. If you go ahead and agree to a home and home series with somebody, you may have your game set for the next 2 years. But with the 8-game conference schedule, let's take one of those games. You're gonna maintain your rivalry. That could be with a quote unquote check game or a regular rivalry. But one of those weeks, let's have an SIAC CIAA crossover in one of those other 2 weeks. Number one. Number two, you also have week 11 out there. Yes, we know 4 teams, 2 SIAC teams, 2 CIAA teams will be playing for conference championships. Let's be creative. We can go ahead and schedule crossovers during week 11, or B, we could do the PSAC model and go ahead and schedule week 11. And if you happen to make the championship game, you get pulled off the schedule. You play the championship game. Then the 2 teams that are left on the schedule play each other for the 11th game. Helps the conference rating overall, may help get an extra team into the playoffs. Just 2 things I wanted to throw out there about the football scheduling model in the SIAC.
Strategy. Good stuff. We'll send this directly to commissioners, and then we'll ask when they get it done that they send a little seed money for the the additional information.
Between that and our baseball proposal, Dr. Holloman ought to be giving us a good royalty check.
Oh yeah, we go hit it all day. Let's get into the second break as we over a little bit. We'll come back on the other side, and as we promised earlier, we will get into the Division I baseball talk. With that, we'll be right back after this second break. On the other side, catch us.
Are you hungry for authentic Caribbean food like jerk chicken, oxtail, red snapper, shrimp, tofu, and rasta pasta? Well, find your way over to Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta.
Them belly full, but we hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, open daily from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And on Friday and Saturday, we're open till 4 a.m. Come to Mango's and put some spice in your life.
Oh, we've got a good thing going.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta. For more info or directions, call 404-698-3992 or log on to mangoscaribbeanrestaurant.com. For instant coupons, text MANGOS to 313131.
Tell your mama hungry, papa hungry, brother hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, authentic Caribbean cuisines.
Open up the door, tell your mama hungry.
T. Madden and Associates is a sophisticated and experienced law firm located in your neighborhood. We're turning injury to cash.
T. Madden and Associates obtained almost $2 million for my injury. They turned my injury to cash.
Now, We can't guarantee how much your injury is worth, but we've recovered millions for our clients. Call T. Madden and Associates at 833-PAID-123. That's 833-PAID-123.
This is Brian Fulford. A.D. Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN SportsWrap. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN SportsWrap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Compress the analytic data with your hip-hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a lot, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment, so we have none other than A.D. Drew, as we have Professor Bishop, Professor Drew, in the building. Let me give you some updates with the NEC. It's been a little tough and challenging for the HBCU programs in terms of what they're getting done. We do have one in the hunt, but this last weekend is really going to go a long way to see whether they get in the tournament. Last year, NEC took the top 6. Haven't heard any updates to see if they expanded the field with the expansion of the league. So we're basing on the fact that they're taking top 6. So what took place this past Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in terms of the HBCU programs? You had Maryland Eastern Shore on Friday lost a close one to Stonehill 7-6. Norfolk State was defeated by Wagner 9-5. Delaware State plays Coppin State, so the HBCU matchup has the Eagles defeating Delaware State 12-7 in terms of what took place on Friday. As we move into Saturday, give you a little update there, and I don't want to spoil it for you. But the team that you want to keep your eyes on if you listen to these scores are, for the most part, Maryland Eastern Shore. Talking about Maryland Eastern Shore, they lost the Saturday contest to Stonehill, 14-2 in terms of that matchup, which was tough. Wagner defeats Norfolk State 14-2 as that continues to go down in terms of what took place. You didn't have the Delaware Coppin State game on Saturday. Like a lot of places, you're dealing with the rainouts here and there. Moving to Sunday to give you the final parts of that matchup. Stonehill gets the sweep, which was tough for Maryland Eastern Shore as they are fighting for that top 6. Give you a little update of what that looks like shortly, but the score of that game was 13-2, Stonehill over Maryland Eastern Shore. Wagner sweeps Norfolk State 6-3 in terms of that matchup. And you have 2 games played with Coppin State and Delaware State as they were able to get them in on Sunday. Coppin State defeats Delaware State. First matchup, they're 12-5. And they go ahead. Coppin State gets the sweep as they defeat Delaware State 16-11. And so in terms of the conference race, what does that mean? If we're going based on what we know, the top 6 teams get in. Well, Maryland Eastern Shore is at number 7. They're behind Merrimack. The good thing is they're only a game back going last weekend. Coppin State has an outside shot as they're 2 games back. In terms of the matchup, Maryland Eastern Shore plays Merrimack. They are at home. They have to find a way to sweep them. If they're able to sweep them, then they jump them, obviously, in terms of 1 game there and are able to make up that 1 loss. You also have a little bit of the fact that in terms of Merrimack actually playing Sacred, I should say, and Maryland Eastern Shore, in terms of their last matchup, at home hosting the matchup that they need to get done in terms of
Stonehill is who they play.
So they have Delaware State that has struggled, so they should be able to get that game. But you know how it is when you have old conference rivals, how they can mix it up. And they have no room for error, really. Unless Merrimack, that is fighting a number 4 team, Sacred, is able to get hot and lose to Sacred. Very much possible as Sacred Heart is in the 4th seed in terms of the matchup there. So a lot there just to say that Maryland Eastern Shore, at the end of the day, to kind of start things off, they got to find a way to bring out the broom and sweep Delaware State. We'll see If that is the action, just give you a little update on the independent program as they're kind of tailed off. You have that program trying to get it in. Go ahead.
Doc,
yeah.
Coppin actually probably has a better chance than Redland Eastern Shore, even though they're 1 game back of Redland Eastern Shore and 2 games back of Merrimack. Coppin plays Norfolk, who sits in the cellar of the NEC. So a Coppin sweep, they could jump both Merrimack and Redland Eastern Shore to claim that last spot.
Are we expecting a Coppin sweep?
They're playing Norfolk, who's sitting in the cellar. So
it's
mathematically, the advantage of the two, who's Shore and Coppin, it goes to Coppin.
Who's at home for that game?
Hold up, I'll give you just a second.
Sure.
Coppin's at home.
Oh, okay.
That's the other thing. Getting over to the Colonial, North Carolina A&T for a while was fighting to be able to be seated in the tournament in terms of the Colonial, but they've really fallen on hard times. They're third from the bottom. Only teams behind them is Monmouth and Townsend. They sit at 11-17 in the conference race. They have gotten some victories of late, but the last couple weekends have not been kind to them in terms of what takes place there. So they're really the long shot. So all your eyes, as you all too said, is about Coppin State and Maryland Eastern Shore. Can they find a way to get some little magic this way and get some things done in terms of what that looks like over the weekend? I'll be interested to see what's that all about in terms of these conference races. Just to give you due diligence, the game on Friday, North Carolina A&T lost to Elon 11-2. Some people like to joke around with A&T as Elon has said that's the rival there. So North Carolina Central fans always like to remind North Carolina A&T that Elon is the new rival. But I guess in terms of a rival matchup on Saturday, North Carolina A&T fights back and gets a win, 11-9, which means you go to the rubber match on Sunday to see what takes place there. Elon takes 2 out of 3. I'll save you all that energy as Elon defeats North Carolina A&T 96. So that's a little bit of the struggle of the Colonial. So enough of that in regards to all that. Let's get into the SWAC to talk a little bit about what's going on that side of the board, particularly in terms of the East Division, in terms of what's going on there. Alabama State continues to show out, get it done as they bring out the brooms against Alabama A&M. So just in general, before we go into the last segment and we can look at both the West and East Division, what are your thoughts on Alabama State, the way they're just being so strong right now? Charles?
Well, it's very interesting. I was talking to Coach Earl Sanders, Toulouse coach, and he was saying he expects for it to be still a very competitive SWAC baseball tournament, even though you have Alabama State that has playing tremendous ball. They won, 10 in a row, 13 in a row, something to that effect.
10 in a row.
10 in a row. But it's hard to just write down a sweep week in, week out. Even we saw this past weekend, Jackson State couldn't sweep Mississippi Valley. Mississippi Valley sitting in the cellar in the East. So just overall, when you take a look at it, even with Alcorn and Southern, Southern couldn't get the sweep on the weekend. So you just looking and you just see the overall play has gotten a little bit better, even when the teams at the bottom of the conference are playing just well enough to at least get a game. I was looking at the game with Alabama A&M and Alabama State Friday. Alabama A&M went into the 6th inning with a 4-0 lead before the wheels came off. So I'm expecting, next week or to be in the next couple of weeks for it to be a really, really competitive SWAC tournament. So that was kind of my overall thoughts. I think things kind of went according to plan this weekend, but still teams were not able to get that 3-0. So that was the things that kind of jumped out for me.
Before I close out this segment, I did want to give kudos to GCAC member Dillard as they got their assignment into the NAIA baseball tournament. So they're there. And then you obviously had Florida Memorial in that 19-inning I don't know what you call that marathon type baseball game, 2-1, where they defeat Albany State, that has had a great season to the credit of Albany State at the SIC. But the last 2 weekends, boy, you talk about tournament play has not been gotten in. They've gotten right to the doorstep, if you would, in terms of some matchups. And they have lost classic games to put them out of the tournament. 2 weeks ago against the SIC in the elimination game between Savannah State, the rivalry game that goes 13 innings that is covered and broadcast by the BCSN. They lose that game. And then obviously in the Black College Championship presented by Tyson, they lose that game to Florida Memorial. So kudos to Florida Memorial to getting it done in that 5-4 victory over Albany State in terms of that 19-inning game. Crazy in terms of what that looks like. Drew, any thought process in terms of Dillard getting that bid to the NCAA tournament in the first year of the baseball program, getting hot in the baseball tournament, getting it done?
That's what baseball is about. Streaks. Baseball is about being hot. When you're hot, you're hot, and sometimes when you're not, you're not. Talk to somebody very close to the Albany State program. I don't want to say their specific title because I don't want to call them out, but his quote was, "We've been choke artists the last couple of weeks." Yeah. Ouch. Ouch. Yeah. I mean, they lost, and you talking 1-run games. Most of their losses this year have been 1-run games. They have not gotten blown out this year. So you get Albany State in a close game, and it seems like they may possibly choke. And I'm gonna go out with this. Why is it that in the Northeast, in the CAA on the East Coast, everybody's played 27 games? Can't get that in the SWAC? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's get out of here on this one. Let's go to break on that.
It's thunderstorms. We're in the South.
Guess what? I'm just saying they done figured out a way to make up all their games. Everybody has played 27 games going into the last weekend, except for one team. And then one team played 30 games because they have an odd amount of teams. So they were the team that went first. They've gotten all their conference games in going into the last weekend. I'm just saying.
Just saying. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this last break. We'll get in on the other side and we'll talk about some of that SWAC baseball. Those oddities of who hasn't played, who hadn't played, and what it may look like going into the tournament based on ranking.
Percentages.
And stick with us. We'll be right back on the other side. We'll talk about what took place this past weekend and maybe a hint of things to come as we get into the last weekend of SWAC baseball. We'll get regular season Eastern and Western Division champions, and then it's time for the tournament. Top 8 seeds go. I think that's pretty much a lot. We'll come back on the other side. Stick with us after our last break.
Nope.
Come on, him.
Ooh, I like him.
Quick, the quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
Now, you can live in Texas and not have a good red meat blend. Texas Cowboy Dust is designed for steak and other red meats. It's out to be my most popular spice blend, made with onions, peppers, ground mushrooms, pink salt, and other spices. Texas Cowboy Dust also goes great with chicken, pork, vegetables, and adds a restaurant-quality sheen to gravies and sauces.
It's like a loop machine. Going around town, trying to get down.
Vanilla smoked sea salt seasoning is for seafood. The tarragon and fennel bring out the natural sweetness in seafood. I also use it in rice dishes, on yams, asparagus, blueberry pancakes, and believe it or not, chocolate chip cookies. Vanilla smoked sea salt adds a salty and savory component to sweet dishes that create a symphony for the tongue.
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High quality cigars plus personal customer service. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge, featuring a meticulous, curated collection of premium cigars. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. That's www.slowburnwaco.com.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna loud, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. As we are joined by the team, Professor Bishop and Professor Drew getting it done. Let's get in here and talk a little bit about the SWAC. Let me give you these scores first, give you a breakdown on the divisions, and then I'll go to each of you to kind of decide which division you want to concentrate, if not on both. Things are getting interesting. One thing that is intriguing to me, there's a little discrepancy in terms of the records for teams. And that's whether you check the Southwestern Athletic Conference or you check D1Baseball.com. I've actually did the schematics in terms of teams played, but on the SWAC site, you have like some duplication of scores of games, and it's going into the record. Like, for example, Prairie View and Southern have played 5 times, even though they have them listed playing at 6. One of those are duplication, and there's 1 or 2 of those in there. So there's a little bit, so do not go strictly by the record. We'll try to give you the updates and clean it up for you. But I do want to give you that indication, and that's why we're not showing the updated records as we usually do to have that information for you. In terms of Friday matchups, Prairie View played 2 on Friday. The game was scheduled to be in Prairie View, and Prairie View is on a losing streak, but they haven't played a home contest conference-wise in a while. They've had to, the field has been getting rain, and even though the days that it's not raining, it's holding water, so they haven't been able to play games there. So 2 of the games against Southern they were going to play at home, they actually played in Southern. Southern won both of those games earlier, so kudos to them. And then you also had the fact this weekend, the game was TSU was supposed to be in Prairie View. They actually played their game in Lamar. They played a Friday and Sunday, allowing the students to graduate, to have graduation ceremony on Sunday, and to get outside of the rain. So on Friday, they had a doubleheader. Texas Southern and Prairie View. Texas Southern won the first game 3-2, and Texas Southern won the 4th game 4-2. You have the picture. Kudos to Ryan McGinty going on and talking about the fact that 100-plus strikeouts. So he's going over the 100 strikeout mark. In
Abraham DeLeon, yeah.
Thank you, DeLeon there. And then he has set the record as he got 2 more strikeouts during the week and get it done. So kudos to what he's been able to do over his career. Anytime you get to 100 strikeouts, that's significant. And when you start setting school records, even if they're modern records, that is significant in itself. And you get to 2 wins in terms of what that looks like in those matchups. Prairie View does salvage and get a game there. They don't get swept in terms of those matchups there. But Bethune-Cookman does get one. A couple from FAMU, taking 2 out of 3. One of the games was 13-4. And Alabama State continues to do with Alabama A&M, even though Alabama A&M, as you alluded to, had some gamesmanship in those games. Alabama State continues to find a way to do what they do, and they win in terms of the matchup. Intriguing, Grambling takes 2 out of 3 from Pine Bluff. Pine Bluff gets a game. In the last one, they beat up on that. So one of the hottest teams out there is Arkansas Pine Bluff, but I think it's a little too late in terms of what that looks like. So it's going to be fascinating to see. Even with makeup games, they just don't have enough games to really to catch up with the 4th spot, whether that's Prairie View or Southern for that matter. Bethune-Cookman wins the 2nd game against FAMU 11-6. Jackson State continues to kind of roll late in the season as they seem to right in the ship in some ways. They defeat Valley, rivalry game 4-1 there. I told you about Grambling defeating Arkansas Pine Bluff in that 2nd matchup, 15-11. Southern defeats Alcorn State 3-0. Southern is hot in terms of what they've done of late. Alabama State over A&M 6-3. Jackson State over Valley, again, doubleheader there, 12-2 in terms of Saturday matchups. Sunday, when things get going, you have your updates there in terms of Prairie View getting a shutout. Texas Southern getting a Prairie View shutout over Prairie View 2-0. FAMU over Bethune-Cookman 5-4, saving the ability not to allow Bethune-Cookman to get the sweep. Bethune-Cookman, although a couple of weeks ago, they were struggling. Talked to the coach, said some injuries out there, but over lately, in terms of getting 4 over Alabama A&M, 2 out of 3 for Bethune-Cookman, they have pushed all the way up to the second spot. I told you about Southern getting the sweep over Alcorn State 5-2. Alabama State does defeat A&M and get the sweep 10-3 in terms of the last game. Arkansas Pine Bluff Pines Grambling 18-8 to get the win, at least a win out of that 3-game set. Mississippi Valley State comes back over Jackson State. I happened to be traveling on the phone and saw them. That was a last inning big bat 2 RBI hit to take over Jackson 7-6. They hold on and able to squeeze out a game there. Kudos to Valley to continue to fight. And so Alcorn State does get a game from Southern 9-8 in terms of those matchups. So you do see a couple of games where teams are playing 4 games, trying to get some of those rainouts that you talked about, Drew, getting the game back here in 2. And so it's some fascinating. Some talk the teams are going to maybe try to squeeze in a game or 2 this week, whether during the week or maybe play games early Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and back in one on Sunday to make sure that they can get a game or 2 back in. The tough thing about the scheduling is it's not like they missed the whole series where you can just schedule a series maybe if you do it. It's like a game here, particularly with Southern. Southern had 2 games canceled against Texas Southern. They had 1 game canceled against Prairie View. So you have those kind of oddities coming up in terms of that. And Pine Bluff has 1 or 2 games against 2 or 3 teams where they're missing. So that's the other trouble in terms of making up a game. You have to travel to multiple locations or get teams all to agree to come to one location to play multiple games and get the facility. So it's going to be fascinating to see what that looks like in terms of that matchup. Last thing here is just to give you an update before I let y'all jump in here, give me some thoughts. I told you Grambling is winning the division 20-6. Texas Southern sitting at 15-9. In second spot, Southern at 14-10. In terms of that ranking, I believe it's actually 13-10 in terms.
I was about to ask.
Yeah, and Prairie View they have listed 13-12, but I have them at 13-13, 500, which is still 3 games above Pine Bluff in a win, but it's 4 games in terms of loss column Pine Bluff there in terms of those seedings there. So little differential game here at who, which could go into seeding a little bit, but this last weekend should play things out. Alabama State is running away with the Eastern Division 24-3, only 3 division losses, 27 games, so they've been able to get them all in. Play their last series this weekend where they travel to Tallahassee, which will be interesting because FAMU wants to see if they can improve their seeding because sitting in the second spot is Bethune-Cookman. I told you got hot of late that sits 18-8. FAMU is behind them at 17-10. Jackson State at 12-15. Valley is 4 games behind in the win column in terms of just 8 wins, but they're actually 7 games behind in the loss column. So you see a lot of differential in terms of what that looks like. Let me start with you, Drew. Just your thoughts in terms of the SWAC, whether you want to go East, West Division, it's on you. Take it away.
I'll start quickly in the East, and I'm going to put my FAMU hat on for this brief comment. If you're Florida A&M, you desperately want to catch Bethune and jump Bethune, because if you jump Bethune, that puts you in the bracket with Grambling.
That's right.
You don't want to be in the bracket with Alabama State, an Alabama State that literally dominates you. But the only way that you could get out of the bracket with Alabama State is to go and sweep Alabama State this weekend. Yeah, y'all do the math and figure that one out. I don't know how this gonna quite work out.
Yeah,
let's go over to the West. Okay, The West, yeah, everybody, all 4 teams who are going to the tournament in the West have missed at least one game. So when we talk about these percentages and everything on the West side, it's really fairer on the West side because everybody has missed at least one game. It looks bad, but comparatively speaking, compared to their peers in the West, it's not that bad. But the interesting thing is, will one of these games, because 2, 3, and 4 are up for grabs right now, will one of these games really matter as far as that percentage? And let's be real, same thing, just like FAMU doesn't want to stay in that number 3 spot. Do you really want to finish number 2 and go over into the bracket with Alabama State if you're in the West? I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think I can echo that. I mean, those were my questions in terms of just making up these 1 or 2 games, especially with regards to Texas Southern Prairie View. Will it matter with regards to where they are seated in the next couple of weeks? And then I come back to this, Doc. How big is it? And I think you touched on it, that Prairie View has not played a home game since the Southern Series and just not having that last at bat at home. How crucial that is with your and I'm saying that from a standpoint with your home fans screaming and cheering and this, that, and the other, trying to give you that momentum. How big is it that they have not been able to have that quote unquote home field advantage?
Good stuff. Good stuff. Great breakdown in terms of what goes on there. Let's go ahead and get out of here and close it up. I did want to give the update. Barrett Williams says, will teams have to make up the games? Isn't it an 80% rule? Previously in the 10-member SWAC, that was a rule, 80% rule. With the expansion, which also expanded the number of games and did not provide an open week, when you had 5 teams, you actually had a week throughout the season, the 10-week season, where every team had a week off. When you expanded to 12 and went to 6 divisions, you increased the number of games significantly in terms of games we played, but you also eradicated the open week. Remember, in the previous framework of the SWAC, when there was 10 members, you had a week off before the championship game. You had a week off before the tournament in terms of that. And that's because you had those open weeks in terms of the way the conference schedule. You don't have that now. Everybody is playing a gauntlet, playing 30 games, and there's actually 3 games in each division each week, 6 games. So you do that over 10 weeks, you can do the calculation. And I'll give that as I took a note, because what's intriguing about that, and we'll get to talk a little bit more about this on Tuesday when we talk about inventory. What does this do with your inventory? So that's one of the things that I found out over the years in terms of MEAC losing some of its members, what it did to inventory and how that plays out on the contract. When you sign a contract saying that you're going to give a streaming and broadcast platform so many games. Well, if you lose members, you lose those games. You can't give them to them. So somehow you either have to have a rebate, or somehow you have to give that back or extend the contract so they get those games in. So those are some things that you think about. On the other hand, it's a promising thing for the SWAC, because now they add all these inventory. Think about all the additional football games. Think about all the additional basketball games. Think about all the additional softball, all additional baseball as you see now. That's a net positive in terms of increasing your inventory. Now I'll actually break down of what that looked like previously, before expansion, and after expansion, in the same way with the MEAC, when you look at de-escalation of the conference from losing members to the numbers of what it does to inventory. But let's get into it. Enough of the talk there. Gave you some business perspective. Kudos to Charles as he went home to visit his mom. A happy belated Mother's Day. I know we said that before we left, but hope all the moms out there in any capacity had great Mother's Day. But I wanted to do a special shout out to Charles, his people, and his mom, particularly going to church there, and all of them wanting to shout out saying they listen to the show. Thank you for listening to the show. We'll see you summer, we'll be able to do a little more of the business talk in regards to giving you the data, since you really appreciate that news. So hopefully you gleaned a little bit about that today in terms of NCAA guideline rules, and a little bit, as we snuck in to close it out, a little bit about the inventory in terms of what that does for broadcast. We'll take a deeper dive maybe on Thursday, if not later this week. Special shout out to Drew, being the great pinch hitter he is. Appreciate you for all you do and all the work. Shout out to Roy in terms of the layman's work that he does in the background, put all the work. One other thing you want to share before we close out, Drew?
No, I was just saluting you back on that. But I'll throw this 2 cents in. We just 2 weeks out from the Tulsa massacre, kind of why we wore the Black Wall Street shirt. That happened. 1921 at the end of May.
Especially as we open the show, most appropriate. I'm glad that you made sure that we got that in there, and we will make sure we honor those that lost their lives tragically in the Tulsa race riot in terms of the massacre that took place there, the appropriate term. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment. We'll see if we can get him in. I think he has a tight schedule, so stay on the hook if you can, AD Drew. In terms, we might need your services as a pinch hitter again. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Mills Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. You know what it is right here, right now. Like, subscribe, and share with your friends. We look forward to next Thursday as we discuss the latest in the news. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, DrKenyattaCaval on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. For those that like the news, and you can follow me on Twitter. I've been sharing a lot of the news from a data perspective for a professor and somebody that's widely in the news, a professor out of the Pac-12 that does analytical data, and he's talking about expansion. And I know it's outside of the HBCU, but these are some of the data metrics that I use as well when I talk about expansion of HBCUs and SWAC. So it gives you a little hint in terms of things that I'm looking at. Also gives you some information in terms of broadcast information, in terms of understanding the relevance of what that looks like. So if you get a chance to check out Twitter, I'm getting really into a lot of that in terms of those followers there, and I retweet their stuff just so you have it and know it. Facebook and YouTube is Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Dream big, continue to move forward. Before we check out, make sure you download my JBN, my BCSN. Obviously, we're having our special support Black businesses, and those Black businesses that want to support us. Check out the website, and you get information on specials we have for you. And we'll talk with you soon. With that, Charles?
Of course.
AD?
Lecture.
Dismiss.
Mahalo.